Good morning everybody, Col here. Lovely day here in Coffs Harbour again today. We always get nice sunny days, really pleased with that. Well, it starts that way anyway and then it goes off. But anyhow, we're here for another show today and hopefully we'll get a little bit done. Now, last week I typed up a message about silver ash and I actually got it wrong. The reason I got it wrong is because I was on the phone to someone else talking about silver top ash, which is commonly known as black ash, and it's a southeastern timber and it's a eucalyptus. The timber that I was talking about, the timber that I typed up was about silver ash, or what I was supposed to be talking about was silver ash. A silver ash, Flinders boyojuditiana, botanical names always get me, is a hardwood. It's reasonably rare, and it's again a Queensland timber, and it's really good to work with. I find it really good. Apparently, it's been used in it's generally used as boat building or musical instruments. It's a really good quality hardwood. Glues well, so forth. So my apologies to those who saw last week's feed. Just what happens when you're talking on the phone and trying to type things at the same time. Somebody told me that men can't do two things at once, and I've proven that a few times. So anyhow, back to where we started from. So now, what we're doing today is we're going to do you may have seen the show that we put up on Friday evening. I was going to try and do it on, put it up on Thursday, but we got carried away with different things, and we never got to put up the extra video on Thursday or Friday morning. I think Pam got it up on Friday afternoon. So I didn't give people a lot of time to have a little bit of a look at it, and it was building the framing jig. Now, the reason I had to build a new framing jig was because the one that I have is too small. So in my collection of framing jigs, I've got about 6 different sizes for 6 different boxes, and you can imagine using a really big framing jig to do frame and panel lid for a little box like this. Is a little bit difficult, particularly if you're using something that's this size, which is the biggest one I had. So I had to build a new one because the lid that I'm making for our boxes here is bigger than that. So that was the show that went up on Friday afternoon. It's a little bit long, but hey, it's at least it gives you a bit of an idea of the sorts of things that I have to go through to get a simple way of doing things, even though it took a fair bit of time. So just bear with it when you're watching it. It's relatively informative, and hopefully you get something out of it. So now what we're going to do is we're going to get into building the frame and panel lid for the big box. Now, this is the lid that we're going to build, and it's just the frame and the panel. Okay, so nothing fancy about it, except that we've got the butterflies in the top here. It overhangs the edge of the box. You can see it's just rounded there, and it overhangs, which is not something that I normally do. This is a little bit extra. The other thing that it does, if I open the box up for you, it's recessed into the bottom of here, so it's got to come inside the box, and we're going to be doing that as well. So that's where we're at, and that's what we're going to do today. So there's our prototype. Up until this stage, this is where we're at with our box. So just shift this out of the way. So what we have at the moment is we've got the box. When you turn it over, you can see that we've got everything fitted nicely. The visual stuff that I talked about earlier is not there anymore, basically because of the technique that I used to fit it. And generally, it's a much nicer frame of a box. Again, we've still got our exposed dovetails. And so our top will go on top like that. And what we have to do now is build the top. Once we've got the top built and sitting in the frame, we then, before we attach it to this, we have to fit our hinges. And the reason we do that will become really clear as soon as I get started doing that, because of the technique that we use to put the hinges in. I have to use a particular technique with some jigs. Again, back to the jigs. So let's get that out of the way. Now, when we're building this, what we need to do is make sure that we get our measurements correct. Now, the overhang on the edge of the box here is 5 millimeters. Okay, that's the plinth protrudes out past the side of the box. What I want to do is I want to make sure that the top visually fits within that overlap. Now, I could do a 5 mil and that would be identical. Now, you can do that, and if that's what you like, that's what you do. But I want to make it a little bit different. I'm going to make it 7 millimeters, and that gives a visual effect where you start at the top and it tapers down to the bottom. And it's only a couple of millimeters, but it does give you a visual effect that works. So I'm going to try that. We're going to do that. So when you measure the frame, my frame here is 380 millimeters plus 14, which is going to be 7 millimeters on the edge along the length, and I've got 260 here plus 14. So my measurements have to add that extra millimeter. Now, the normal process that I go through when I'm doing frame and panel lids, particularly when I'm doing something like this, where my frame and panel lid is fitted inside a carcass, it's fitted inside the carcass, so it fits inside the two ends. That's the normal technique. What I would do when I'm making that lid would be to when I make that lid, what I do is I give myself an extra 2 millimeters so that I can cut and fit to get it to go in the box. I don't have to do it to the big box. So it's going to be exactly the right size, and then I'm going to round over the edges. And if it comes off, an extra millimeter comes off, well, it doesn't really matter. It's still going to protrude out past the edge of the box. So that's where we're going with it, and that's what we're going to do with it. So last week, I had to go over that again because somebody asked me about all of the techniques and the way I was going about it, and why I did that during the week. They obviously missed a bit in the middle of the show. So what I've done is I've cut, and I did this last show, is I cut my frame. I cut my frame to the correct length, and you can see that it protrudes out over the edge, and it'll be 14 millimeters. And I cut my miters to suit. Okay, did that with my 45-degree mitre jig on the drop saw. And somebody said to me during the week, that would make really good frame for picture framing. Of course it will. That's probably a technique that could be used. And putting butterflies in it, well, hey, you're going to make your frame just that little bit nicer. So, yeah, think about it. It can be used for all sorts of different things. That was a reference to the cramping jig. So when you look at, I've numbered all of these, when you look at my frame, this is what we're going to have. Okay, now what I want to do, just get this sitting pretty right. What I want to do is I want to put a butterfly in there. Now, this is where you can use a couple of little visual things that will help you decide where you want the butterflies. Now, the butterflies are generally fitted. Go back to my little box again. How you fit the butterflies in is dependent on how wide, the colour, where you want it, the size of the box. There's a whole heap of different things, and quite a lot of them are visual. So this one here, even though it looks like a big butterfly, I've used my H10 cutter to actually build that butterfly. And those of you who know our jig know that the butterflies, the H10 dovetail bit is quite small. So visually it looks quite large on that little box. If I put the same size on here, it would disappear. So what I've done with even on this one here, another one, this box here is twice the size of that little one we just saw. You can see the H10 is still quite small, and you can see I've also put it closer to the center. So visually, where you put the box or where you put the butterfly is a personal thing, and I think that if we keep it personal, then what that does, that makes it a bespoke box. So you can say there's only one of them, this is it. So, and this box here, whoop, a bit loud. When you look at this box, just go back to our camera again. When you look at the butterflies in this box, you can see that they look pretty much the same as the smaller boxes. Yet these ones here are done with the A10 cutter. The A10 cutter, 10 millimeters across, so that's a 10 millimeter piece of material in there, whereas the H10 is 6 millimeters. So there is a bit of a difference, and they still look like they fit with the rest of the jig, rest of the box. So think about what you do with the butterflies when you do the butterflies, if you're going to go down that road. It's not something you can just pop up and do, you know, any willy-nilly. It's just, you really do have to think about it, and you have to do something about it. So this box, this frame, what I've done is I've cut the material for the butterflies, a couple of pieces of material here, and you can see the difference in the two. This is the 6 millimeter. This is the one that I've got in all those smaller boxes, and this is the one that I've got in the big box. You can see there is quite a bit of difference. And I thought what I might do with this, just for visual effect, is put two butterflies in, one big one, one small one. That may give me a nice effect. So visually that's how they're going to sit. Probably need to turn that a bit so that you can actually see what we're going to be doing. So I'm going to put the big butterfly at the back, like that, and then the little one in front of it. All I have to do is work out where I want to cut my butterflies. So we're going to have a little play with that as well. Right, just a little treat. So the first one's going to be about there somewhere, and I'm not going to prescribe a measurement. I'm going to do it just visually, and I think that will probably work where it is now. I've got plenty of material at the sides here for support when I put the butterfly in. I've got plenty of material from there to the back so that I can round it over, and this one here will fit closer in towards the centre, and that again, plenty of support in the middle here, and plenty of support between the two butterflies. And even though they're going to be a little bit small, you just have to be careful that when you're cutting the butterflies, you have to go very, very carefully to get it to work properly. So and you don't break things off. So I need a pencil. I'm just going to fit those two pieces of material together like that. That's how they're going to live. I want them just making sure that my corner is perfectly in line. I've got my corner up there as well. Just hold the two pieces together. And this one's going to fit about there somewhere. So if I put a mark there. And this one's going to be about there. Okay, so we're going to have the two butterflies just there.
So that's at the centre. That's at the centre of the keys.
Yes. As Pam was saying, at the centre of the key. So that's the centre of our key through there, the centre of that key right through there, or the butterfly. Okay, so I need a tri-square. Two marks. Just checking to make sure that I have it right. My mark there. My mark there. And that's given me where my mark is. Now, here's the other thing. We need to work a height. How far from this point to here do we cut our butterfly? Now, the router bit we're using will be the A10 for the big one. Our length of the A10 from the tip to the end of the cutting tooth is 13 millimetres. Now I don't want to go the whole 13 millimetres, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut that about 10 millimetres. Should give a reasonable sort of a butterfly. So if I got 10 millimetres, that means that from this side here to this side here is going to be 20 millimetres. So if I just measure 10 millimetres on there, that gives me a height for my cut. Okay, and I'm just going to scribe a little line. So that's going to be a setup for that. Now the router bit that I'm going to use for the second one is our H10. As you can see, much, much smaller. So this one here only has a 10 millimetre cut. I don't want that 10 millimetre. I'm going to bring that back to about 7 or maybe 8 mil. Might even go even a little bit less. And that will give me a shape that's a bit like this with the butterflies. Okay, so this one will be wide, this one will be narrow. So now we're going to, if I measure that, let's do it at 7 millimetres. That gives me a 14 millimetre piece of material. 7 is there, and that will be the depth of cut for my little one. Okay, so we've got a small one here and a large one at the back. Okay, so that's what we're going to do, and we'll set up for that. We can get this out of the way. And now it's just a matter of cutting all our butterfly, all our dovetails for the butterflies. And I'm going to bring down this jig. Now, this is our mini jig. This is the one that I've developed for cutting butterflies in all our boxes and so forth. It has a 45-degree cut on here. Okay, so this is tapered. Oh, better bring it over where you can see it. So it has a 45-degree taper on the stop. We use it in conjunction with a 45-degree triangle that sits on there, and our piece of timber generally fits in there. Now that's not going to work this time because our piece of material is way too thick. If you look at that, you can see it's way too thick, and I cannot get purchase of the bearing on the teeth to give me an even start of the cut. So I'm going to revert to our A10 jig. I'll put that one away. So if we get the A10 down, you can see with the A10 I have a little bit more space. The fingers on the template actually protrude past the material far enough so that I can get purchase of the bearing on here, and I'm going to use the bearing, I'm going to use both the H10 and the A10 to cut these on the A10 jig. Sounds a bit confusing, but you'll see how it works. Now, the thing with this jig is we've got different stop here, so we have to change the stop. So that's the first thing that we're going to do. I have another stop here that has, as you can see, it has a 45-degree cut on it. And again, I'm going to use my stop on here. So the first thing we're going to do is set up the A10, and all I'm going to do is line that up visually with the middle of, and we're on the dovetail side, the middle between the two fingers. Now, it's not critically important that you're in exactly the right spot. It's just a measurement. Right up my stop, and as you can see, the 45-degree stop will then roll onto the top of the piece of timber, and there it's nice and stable. The important thing to remember is that you're hard down on top of the template. That is critical. All right, that way you're going to get a 90-degree dovetail off the miter cut, and that's what we're looking for. Couple of stops, a couple of cramps I should say. So that one's in there. The important thing to remember is make sure that you cramp the triangle in place. The triangle will stay put the whole time. When we want to cut our second one, it's a matter of turning it over and just sliding it straight in, clamping it up, and then doing the cut. Now, the other important thing that I should have mentioned earlier is make sure, apart from the cobwebs, make sure you have a clean backing board on there. Otherwise, you end up with tear out in the back of here, and that will show up in the box. Just want to put that on a little bit tighter than that.
time you actually flip the timber like that.
Yes, that's
in the box making process, isn't it?
yes. That Pammy just made a very valid point. The only time that I ever change the timber end to end is when I'm cutting the butterflies. I don't do it for any other time. Normally you rotate sideways. This time we're flipping it over, and that, like Pammy says, it's the only time that we do that. Okay, let's get started here. Now, we need to set the height. You've got the height marked in here. Okay, so we'll just adjust it to the height. And if it doesn't go straight into that height, it doesn't really matter. You can go a little bit higher, a little bit smaller. It's up to you. Pretty close. Okay, that's just a matter of cutting that. Now remember which one you're cutting. You're cutting the second one, the outside one. So stay put. Once you cut your first one, you're going to see where that will sit every time anyway, and you'll cut it in the right place. So earmuffs on, everybody. Here we go. That's given me a perfect little dovetail. So now flip it over like so, pop it in. You need to remember we're cutting on this one here. Second piece. Okay, so that's given us all our butterflies for the large butterfly. And when we put that together, 1 and 1, there's a couple of little little furry bits that have to be tidied up, but you can see now how nice that looks. That's going to look really, really nice when we get the butterfly cut in there. It's just a bit of tidy up there. It's got a bit of fur on it. So it's come up quite nice. So now what we need to do is cut the second one. The second one might be a little more difficult. We'll see how we go with it. I've not done this with 2 different sizes in the past. I had it out a bit here somewhere. I'll put it down. There it is. I need to change the route a bit. So this is a first. And you guys will see it live. Warts and all, as Pammy says. Well, hey, I hope there's not too many warts. And we'll see how we go. Whoop. Crucial thing, just make sure your router bit is working properly. A bit of that, a little bit of oil. I just wanted to make sure it is going to work super, super nice. I was using that the other day and I didn't clean it afterwards. Okay, so this was our other marking. This is the one that we marked before. You can see where I've cut it, and we've marked that. This one hasn't got any fur on it because I cleaned it off. That may interfere, that little bit of fur on there. I don't know if you can see that. There's a little bit of fur on there. It may interfere, so a bit of light sandpaper. Just give it a light sand off there just to take that off. Do that to all of them. I just want it flat. This one here. It's just where it pushes through. This one's done a little bit of damage, but I can fix that. It's not a problem. Beautiful. Now the one we marked is here. Yeah, this is going to be a little bit of fun. We'll just see how it works. We don't need to change anything on our settings. We don't need to change anything here. Well, actually, yes, we do. We do. We're going to have to move a few things. Line this up with the centre, any centre. So slide in, lock this up, and then we can bring this along. Lock our piece of timber in, and then we just adjust our height again. This is where we'll go with it. Now remember, this is not as high, so we're only going to cut a small amount. Come up a little bit. There. Okay, so it's going to cut that. It's quite exciting. Quite exciting starting something or doing something that you've not done before. I have done 2 butterflies together on other boxes, but not 2 different sizes on a big box. So Like I say, on the smaller boxes, it's a very simple task because the timber's not that thick. This time the timber's a little bit thicker, so let's see how we go. Wow, how nice does that look? Is that going to look good or what? We've got a nice little taper across our dovetails to the centre. Looks really good. Now let's get the rest of them cut. I am so pleased that that worked really well. Just shift some of this stuff out of the way. Don't need any of that anymore. Put this down out of the way. And we'll see what our result is. A bit of sandpaper just to take those furry little edges off. You'll get a furry edge on the back side where the router bit comes off the timber and doesn't cut it perfectly, but that's okay. Just be careful when you sand it that you don't chip the corner off. If you chip the corner off, it means a repair in the visual part of the box. Look what we've got. Wow. The right one. That's not the right one. Where is number 2? That's 3, 1. There we go. doesn't really matter. The numbers just give me an idea of where my grain is. I can pick that up in a second, work it out again. I've sanded them off, unfortunately. Just making sure I get all that flat. Number 4 and number 3 is there. Okay, let's put all this together. 3, 3, 4, 4, 3. There we go. That is going to look very special. A little bit of tidying up around the edges of the butterflies, but you can see that they actually fit very nicely. And once we get the butterflies in there, they're going to look really, really good. Now, the thing I have to do here now is I need to cut a trench around the inside of that before, so that I can put my panel in. Now the panel, we'll only get that done today, so next week I'll be cutting butterflies. But this is my panel. And I've cut the panel so that it's going to sit below the surface. If you see, I've got a little raised section here. I'm going to round over that corner there. So that's the first task we're going to do. Then we're going to cut the trench to fit this panel in. And then we're going to build the panel to the right size and go from there. So my first task is to round over this edge and do that on all of those pieces. That effect will show up like this on the box. You need to round that over, and it has to be done now before you go too much further. It's very difficult to try and do that and get nice clean corners when the box is actually built. So I'm going to do that beforehand. I'll do that now. We may get the trench done too. I'm running out of time here today. Adding that little extra bit of detail in, as you can see, it takes up the time. Okay, so the rounding over bit I'm using is the smallest one we do, which just has a 1/4 inch radius. So it's very small, it's not very big. It's the one that we sell in our kit. It's only small. Now, I need a different ruler. And what I'm going to do here is set this up, and so that, right in on that, Penny. So that I'm just above the outside corner edge. That'll give me a perfect radius, and I check that with the ruler because the ruler's flat. And then when I cut these, now remember, start on the corner, right where on the edge of it, so that that lines up with the center of your router bit, and always go left to right. Okay? Now, I want to do the top edge, so it gets turned over like so, and we'll cut through and do that. Okay, so ears on everybody. So I've rounded over that edge. What I didn't want to do is create a little step along this edge. I just wanted it rounded over. That's all I want to do. Now, if you want to put the step on there, by all means do that. Lift the router bit a little bit and you will get a relatively nice edge. So I've got all my outsides marked with an arrow. You can see I've got them on there. So they're the top edge that I have to cut. Now you'll notice what I did there was I went along here and I started, just come in on this a little bit. I started right in the middle of the router bit and I went all the way along until I got this corner to the centre of the router bit. If you don't stop there and you continue on, you'll get that happening. Now that causes a rounding this way along this edge here, and we don't want that. We want a nice clean join like that where it's rounded right to the point. Okay, so we need to be accurate with that. If you go around the corner, you're going to get a little bit of a round bit there and it won't look very nice. So the idea is to be very particular about what you do with your bits. Okay, so now what we need to do is cut a trench. I think we might have time to do that. So you can see now, when you look at that, you can see it's rounded over, and that's what it's going to look like once we've got the piece of timber recessed into the trench. So a nice rounded bit into the trench. So I need to mark that. So very sharp pencil. And this is going to be the height when we adjust. So if I just do a thing there, you can make this any thickness you like, but that's where I've got to have the top of the trench cutting, just below that line. And if you look very carefully, you can actually see that it's the end of the rounded over section. Right, so the round over section goes all the way down there, and then it becomes the trench, which will be a 4mm trench through there, and then we'll rebate that into there. Okay. Now the router bit we're using for that is this one. It's the slot cutter 700. We also sell this in our kit. And we need a fence, sitting up like so. So setting up for this, quite easy. This time what we'll do, I've put that mark on there and I'm just going to sit the top of the router bit just underneath that mark. Like so. Now our fence, as you can see, our fence covers most of that router bit, which is very important. It's a big router bit and it is quite dangerous. So we will make sure that your fence covers over the top of the router bit. And now what we're going to do is we measure out. I'm going to make that 10mm deep. So I just want to make sure I've got it out to its widest point. It's not a critical measurement, but it just gives you some sort of uniformity to work to when you're dealing with all the other aspects of the box. Lock that in, lock that on there. And now I'm going to slide those along like so. Okay, so they will get pushed along the route a bit. Shift some of this stuff out of the way so I've got somewhere to work. What I need now is a push block. So I'll set the push block on there. Here's my push block. And we'll slide along there. And as you can see, my fingers are way too close to the gear. So what we'll do is we will use another piece of the timber as a push stick against there, push block on top, and we'll slide along. Okay. Now, it's very difficult to see that from the angle that we've got there. So I'll just change the camera for you. So we'll come around. Excuse me, Pam. Take that. We'll come round and get that camera set up here. Let's see what we have. Okay, so that's probably a better view for you to see what we're doing. Okay, you can grab that now. Okay, ears on. Okay, fairly simple, fairly easy. As you will, we're going to stop here because the next task is going to take me another, say, 15-20 minutes, and that goes way past. But what we're going to do here, what I've done here is I've actually prepared the frame pieces. So they've all got their rounded over section, they've got a trench, they've got their butterflies cut. The only thing we haven't done is built the frame, the panel to go in the frame. So that's what's going to happen next week. We're going to start with, I'll sit this up here like this, and you can see where we're at. And the frame is starting to come together nicely. So a little bit by little bit, and we're going to get quite a nice frame. And you can see we've got the trench in there. And like I said about picture framing, what a great picture frame. It'll work a treat. So when you're doing this next week, think about the other aspects or the other things that you can make with this technique. So if you've asked lots of questions on our thing there, I'll get back to you with those next week, and we'll go through a whole lot. So next week will be frame, butterflies, and then we'll put the whole lot together, and then we'll build the rest of the bits to start the hinging process. So that's it for this week. So stay safe, everybody. If you're locked down, hope it gets better for you. Surely it will. But anyway, stay safe, everybody, and I will catch you all next week with all sorts of other bits and pieces. So see you all later.